Hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm discussing Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, as it is currently streaming on Netflix. But before I do that, I should say what stays to have every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers. But you prefer to listen to your podcasts, well, guess what? You can with this one too, at Nice the Movies on Spotify. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whereas you may be watching or listening to the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and leave me some feedback on things to improve on with future podcasts, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. Also, I should say today, and people might have already noticed it in my voice, I am not feeling too well. I'm feeling a bit under the weather at the moment, so bear with me today if I don't always make the best sense. And sorry at one point if I start coughing badly, because I've got a really bad cough right now, and I'm just feeling really dizzy. But I wanted to do this podcast because I saw this movie not too long ago and I wanted to talk about it. And also, I should say, apologies if you hear sound interference in the background of this video, because my next door neighbour is having their kitchen done. So if you hear some loud banging in the background of this video, if you hear somebody drilling, that's just what's going on. It's nothing I can control, unfortunately. So if we do hear some sound interference during this podcast, I do apologise. It's out of my control. Yet, other than that, other than all those problems that might come up during this podcast, this should be a very fun podcast to listen to and or watch. So, let's get into it. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I hadn't seen this movie, at least I hadn't seen it the full way through anyway, until last week. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever actually properly watched this film. I remember watching the first 10 minutes of this film when I was much younger, but I think I just gave up in it back then. God knows what was going on with me, but I hadn't properly seen this film until last Friday. And I saw it on Netflix. I saw that it was on there. I think it's still streaming on Netflix. It might not be by the time this podcast is out, by the time you may be watching this podcast. But as of now, it's still streaming on Netflix. And I saw it on there. And at the moment, I'm doing this thing called a film a day. You know, I'm trying to watch a film every day for the next 365 days, you know, for the next year. And I saw this on there, like, you know what, I'm in the mood for something fun tonight. Something that's going to be exciting. Maybe not something so hard-hitting, maybe not something so complex, and maybe not something, maybe not even a comedy, not even a straight comedy. I'm not in the mood for that. I'm in the mood for something fun and for something exciting and something to make me feel uplifted. And so I heard good things about this film and I thought to myself, let's check it out, let's see what all the fuss is about. And I am so glad that I did. This is not only, in my opinion, the best Robin Hood film that I've seen. By the way, I've seen all the Robin Hood films. I phrase that a bit weirdly. No, this is the best Robin Hood film, in my opinion. And it's also, though, now one of my all-time favourite films. I mean, I might have to think about that a bit more, because I've only seen it once properly the full way through, but I've been watching clips from it on YouTube quite a lot recently, ever since I first saw it, and I saw it about a week ago now. I've been watching clips on it, I've been rewatching clips on YouTube, I've been thinking a lot about the film, I've been humming the theme tune from it, you know, the Michael Kamen main theme tune, you know, bum 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 ba-da-dum bum 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 bum, ready for my channel to get demonetized. Not that I earn any money off this anyway, but still, you get the point I'm making. You know, I love that theme tune for the film, and I've been humming it recently. I've been thinking about how much fun I had watching this film, and it's just stayed in my head. It's stuck in my head more than any other film I've watched recently. And that's not to say I've watched bad films recently. I watched some really good ones, but this is the one that has now taken a very special spot in my mind because I haven't really stopped thinking about it. I really haven't. I've listened to the main theme that I just badly sung not too long ago in this podcast. I've listened to that daily. I've been thinking about all the joy I had when I was watching this film. I absolutely loved it. I really did because it has a bit of everything in there. You know, it's full of joy and it's full of heart, as I already mentioned. And at the same time, though, it's got this fantastic adventure feel in there. It's thrilling in parts and it's exciting, but it's also a bit heartbreaking. And there's some real emotion in this film. And it's got that flamboyance that you want from a film like this. And it's also got that visual wit which you get in the best, swashbuckling adventures. I love these type of movies. One of my favourite franchises of all time. In fact, I was about to say it is my favourite franchise of all time. Nope, that's still Star Wars, but one of my favourite franchises of all time is the Indiana Jones franchise because I love those swashbuckling adventure films. I love going on this journey and experiencing this adventure with Indiana Jones, and that's what I felt with Robin Hood in this film. In a weird way, it actually felt like Indiana Jones meets Robin Hood, and I mean that in the best way possible, though. I was watching this and I got a lot of Indiana Jones vibes from it. And again, not in a bad way. I loved those films to pieces. And I love the way it was directed too. I mean, Kevin Reynolds directed this film. I think that's the director's name. I don't actually have it up here. But Kevin Reynolds directed the film. And I must admit, I'm not too familiar with him. I do know that he directed Waterworld, but I haven't seen that film because I haven't heard many good things about it. Yet, he directed this film. And there's just this gravitas and energy and just this excitement they had in his direction, which I love to pieces, and the performances. I mean, Alan Rickman as a sheriff in Nottingham, we lost that actor too soon. He's just, I love him in almost everything I've seen him in. In fact, in everything I've seen him in, I've loved him in it. I love him in Love Actually. I love him as Snape in Harry Potter films. In fact, I was in the Harry Potter films. I haven't seen them all together. I think I've seen bits of them on TV over the past couple of years, but I haven't seen them all together for about, 10 years. But I always remember him from them, though. Whenever I think of Harry Potter, I always think of Snape. I always think of Alan Rickman Snape. And I also love him to pieces in the first Die Hard movie as Hans Gruber. I watch the film every Christmas, and he is the part of the film that I look forward to when I rewatch the film the most. Whenever I rewatch Die Hard, I look forward to his villain the most. And I heard some good things about his villain in this film, about him as a sheriff of Nottingham, but I didn't realise quite how good he was in this film. I didn't realise quite how much I was going to love him when I was watching the film, because he has all the best lines of dialogue, and he's got all these, he just chewed at the scenery a bit in the way it works so well, in a similar way to his performance as Hans Gruber in Die Hard. And Alan Rickman, the late great Alan Rickman at that, he is just, he's so good in this film. And I also love Kevin Costner. I don't care what one says. I thought Kevin Costner's hair worked in this film. I just heard somebody criticise it online the other day. I'm like, actually, no, I didn't mind his hair in this film. I didn't mind his wig. And I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Costner. I watched the first episode of Yellowstone, which is about 90 minutes long, so it's the length of a full-length feature film, and it wasn't for me. And one of the things I didn't like about the first episode of Yellowstone was it felt for me, and this is me, but it felt like Kevin Costner was phoning it in a bit. And I've seen him in some of the films in the past, and I haven't loved him in things I've seen him in now. I think he gave a great performance in Oliver Stone's film JFK. I really liked his performance in that. And I really like him in The Untouchables, although, that's got a much bigger cast. It's not just him. But, I still really like him in films I've seen him in the past, but I haven't always loved him. I loved him in this film. I loved him as Robin Hood. He is the best Robin Hood I've seen, and I'll get onto my thoughts on other Robin Hood films quite shortly in this podcast, but he's great. Christian Slater was awesome in this film. The one who plays Marion, I'm going to really mispronounce the name, but it's like Mary Elizabeth Mastrange. Mastrantonio. I might have got that right, but I've got a feeling I horribly mispronounced her name, so I do apologise if I am. But she was great. She'd been great in films like Colour of Money, The Abyss, which is my favourite James Cameron film, and she was also great in Scarface. And she, though, is wonderful as Marion in this film. And I don't care, by the way, I didn't care whatsoever that mine had an American accent. That didn't bother me. I know historically that's inaccurate, and obviously the film is set in the UK, so she wouldn't have an American accent, but I didn't care. I didn't care as well that Christian Slater didn't have an American accent, because I was just caught up in everything. They didn't really care about the film's problems, because Morgan Freeman was also wonderful in the film. Morgan Freeman was so great in there. I didn't realise he was in this film, and all the performances were just so compellingly wonderful to watch. And in my opinion, this is the best Robin Hood film. And I've seen other Robin Hood films, as far as I know, that are out there. I may not have seen one of them, but, I'm pretty sure I've seen all of them. And there's some Robin Hood films which I'm a big fan of. Like the original Robin Hood film from 1938 called The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn as Robin Hood. I had to watch that for a film class once, and I thought, because back when I was doing film studies at university, I was like, sometimes you watch a film and it feels like it's homework, you know what I mean? And I sat down to watch The Adventure of Robin Hood, though we had to watch it as part of a film course, and I was blown away by it. I was watching it and it didn't feel like I was watching homework, It felt like I was watching something that I just felt so into it. I think the original, The Adventure of Robin Hood from 1938, is a perfect family adventure film. It's brilliant. But it doesn't have Alan Rickman in there, and it doesn't have that Michael Kamen musical score. I think the musical score to that original The Adventure of Robin Hood is very good, but it's not as good as the musical score to Prince of Thieves. At least, not for my money. So I really like... In fact, I would even say I love The Adventure of Robin Hood from 1938. But I prefer Prince of Thieves. And then you get Disney's Robin Hood from 1973. That's what it said on Google. It's from anyway, because I saw on YouTube earlier. It was recommending me, because I was watching clips from Prince of Thieves. It was recommending me to watch... It was giving the recommendation of watching Disney's Robin Hood. And it was saying it's from 1958. But then I looked up on Google and it said it's from 1973. So I'm not sure when it actually came out. But Disney's Robin Hood, the cartoon animated one with... Robin Hood is a fox. I remember enjoying that movie when I was a kid, and I rewatched it literally, I think it was a day or two after I watched Prince of Thieves for the first time. I rewatched Disney's Robin Hood, and I remember enjoying it as a kid, as what he mentioned, and I even enjoyed it now. I mean, it doesn't have that same excitement and thrill that the best Robin Hood movies have, or that Prince of Thieves have, or that Prince of Thieves, or that Prince of Thieves has, but at the same time, it's got some really good moments, and it's got a lot of heart in there. It's a Disney movie, so expect that from a Disney film, and it's got some quite heartbreaking moments, and it's not a bad watch. I liked it. I think it's okay. Yet it doesn't have, as I've already mentioned, that sense of adventure and excitement that Prince of Thieves has. And I didn't like it quite as much as I thought I was going to on a rewatch, because I remember enjoying it quite a bit as a kid. And I suppose now my perspective on film has changed a bit. And so I didn't dislike the film. For a film under 90 minutes, it flew by. It didn't drag or anything like that. And believe me, I watched some 90-minute films recently where it feels like it has dragged a bit. But that wasn't the case with Disney's Robin Hood. And there's plenty to admire with that film. I just don't think it's great. And then I also remember watching Robin Hood Men in Tights a while back when I was... I haven't seen this film recently again, but I remember watching it for the first time about 10 years ago now, and I found it funny. I remember finding it funny, but, it's not great, because it's a parody, and the parodies don't work for me. I mean, it's from Mel Brooks, as far as I remember. Yeah, it's from Mel Brooks. Yeah, this film, I think it was written and directed by Mel Brooks, and I feel about Robin Hood Men in Tights the same way I feel about Spaceballs. Neither films I hate or really dislike that much, yet they're not as they're not great films. You know what I mean? It feels like they outstay their welcome a bit. And there are parts I remember really liking of Robin Hood Men in Tights, but I also don't remember loving that film. And yeah, I didn't think it was great. So, yeah, it doesn't hold a candle to Prince of Thieves for me. And then you get Ridley Scott's Robin Hood film from 2010, which starred Russell Crowe, Kate Blanchett, Mark Strong, Oscar Isaac, and there was somebody else in there that was quite big. I forgot the top of my head right now. But yes, you get Ridley Scott's Robin Hood film from 2010, which I only watched for the first time last night, because even though it's not beloved, you know, even though it's not as, even though it wasn't as well received as some other Robin Hood films in the past, I wanted to rewatch it. I wanted to watch it for the first time, should I say. I wanted to watch it to see if I wanted to watch it to see if I agreed or disagreed with the critics, because I know some people close to me, like one of my brothers, is a big fan of the Ridley Scott version of Robin Hood from 2010, and I wanted to see if it was any good, because I like a good Ridley Scott film. I remember liking Kingdom of Heaven. I remember really liking The Last Duel from 2019, or no, it actually came out in 2021. I remember really liking that film. There was another Ridley Scott film which I really liked not too long ago, The Martian. That's a great film. Well, I didn't love Alien actually, but you know, I've liked a lot of Ridley Scott films in the past, and so I wanted to see what his interpretation of Robin Hood was like. And honestly, it was fine. I didn't hate it. There were some really, really good moments, and there was so much great craftsmanship on screen with that film. I'm not saying it was bad at all, because I would say in parts I was entertained by it. I mean, there were some parts when it felt directionless, you know, there were some parts when it felt aimless, you know what I mean? Yet at the same time, the battle sequences, particularly the climactic battle sequences, had this grip to them, and I think Ridley Scott has this eye for directing fantastic medieval type battle sequences, whether it's in Gladiator or whether it's in Kingdom of Heaven, or even, I remember there were parts of Exodus, Gods and Kings, which I did think were well directed. I didn't like that film overall. And, you know, if you just look at the trailer for Napoleon coming out later this year, which is my most anticipated film for the rest of the year, that looks like it has some fantastically and masterfully shot battle sequences. And so you kind of expect that from a Ridley Scott film. And Kate Blanchett was magnetic as Marion. No, I'm not going to say she's my favourite Marion performance, actually. I still think the one in Prince of Thieves is better, but she was great as Marion, bringing life to a film that felt dull in parts. And, you know, there were parts, again, I would even say it, there were significant parts of the 2010 version of Robin Hood, the Ridley Scott version of Robin Hood with Russell Crowe, which weren't too bad, which were actually quite good. Yeah, the film was too long. A criticism that has been held of many Ridley Scott films, a criticism that I agree with in parts to some of these films as well. And I didn't really like Russell Crowe's Robin Hood. It does show some range, and my favourite Russell Crowe performances are ones where he's either having a lot of fun or showing that he's showing range. Because you do get some Russell Crowe performances. And I think Russell Crowe is a good actor. I really like him in films like American Gangster. Love him in Nice Guys. That might be my favourite Russell Crowe performance. But the thing is with Russell Crowe, right, he didn't always play stoic characters, but he played a lot of stoic characters. And it felt like he was playing a stoic version of Robin Hood. He was showing some range, but not nearly as much range as you want from an actor playing Robin Hood, and I didn't really believe in his romance with Marion too much. That's not a diss on either the actors. That's not a diss on Russell Crowe or Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett, one of the best parts of Ridley Scott's Robin Hood, but I didn't really believe in that romance. And Oscar Isaac I found to be annoying, if I'm going to be honest. Love Oscar Isaac. Love him in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Love him in films like Ex Machina. Love him in the first Dune film. Everything I see Oscar Isaac in, I'd usually love. Didn't really like what he was doing in Robin Hood. Didn't really like him in that. And Mark Strong also wasn't particularly fond of in that film. You know, I love Mark Strong as Merlin in the Kingsman franchise, and I love him in the first Kick-Ass film. And yeah, whenever I see Mark, it's one of those, again, much like Oscar Isaac, normally when I see Mark Strong in something, I really like him in it. wasn't a big fan of him in this film though. Wasn't a big fan of him in Robin Hood, and yeah, I felt the same about a lot of performances in that film. I mean, Kate Blanchett was great. I liked Max von Sydow in that film, and William Hurt was good too. The late great William Hurt. But yeah, Willie Scott's Robin Hood felt directionless. You know, it didn't feel like it really had anything to say about this story that hadn't already been said. It may be the most historically accurate. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm having a guess there. And I liked parts of the film. There was clearly a good craftsmanship on screen, but that really Scott version of Doctor Who, that really Scott version of Robin Hood was not as good as it could have been. I think it was made now would actually be a lot better, because it seems like Ridley Scott is starting to find his footing again. Anyway, then you got onto the 2018 version of Robin Hood, which starred Taron Egerton and Jamie Foxx. I remember reviewing this film in 2019 when I first started this channel. I might have reviewed it in 2020 actually, early 2020, back when I was recording reviews of films on my phone. Now look, I'm using this actually expensive camera, but anyway, I remember watching this film for the first time, good couple of years by now, and I saw it on Netflix, and I didn't mind it for the first time I saw it. I was like, okay, this is not a terrible film. It's not that good, but it's not terrible. The more I think about that version of Robin Hood now, you know, the latest version of Robin Hood that we had, the more I really dislike it. Taron Egerton is wonderful in that film. Thank God he was in that film. And Jamie Foxx, I pretty much like in everything he's in. Love Jamie Foxx. And their chemistry was the best part of that film. Everything else was so dull, and I love some of the actors involved in that film. Love Ben Mendelsohn. Didn't really like him in that film though, and it felt like it was trying to be Batman Begins. And you know, the more I think about it, the more I really dislike that version of Robin Hood. And one of the things which was really irritating about that version of Robin Hood too was that they never really called, from what I remember, they never called Robin Hood Robin Hood. They called him the Hood. Like, even in the Ridley Scott version of Robin Hood, they don't call him Robin Hood that much. They don't call Russell Crowe's character Robin Hood. I think they don't call him to the end of the film. Bear in mind, the film's about 2 hours and a half, and, you know, you have to wait for that, but still, you know, they do eventually call him Robin Hood. But in the Taron Egerton version of Robin Hood, the one from 2018, they do not call him Robin Hood at all. They call him the Hood. And I'm sitting there getting so irritated by that. And on paper, with that cast, Taron Egerton, Jamie Foxx, Jamie Dornan, Ben Mendelsohn, there's somebody else in that film who I quite liked. On paper, the film sounds like it should be so much fun to watch. It is not good whatsoever. Yeah, so that version of Robin Hood does not hold a candle to any of the best versions of Robin Hood, particularly Prince of Thieves. Honestly, it's kind of abysmal, that version. The 2018 version of Robin Hood is kind of abysmal. And then there's been other versions of Robin Hood which aren't film, you know, which aren't film adaptations. There was a Doctor Who episode of there was a Doctor Who episode. Doctor Who did an episode based on Robin Hood during the Peter Capaldi era, and I was never the biggest fan of the Peter Capaldi era. That's just me. But I remember watching that episode with the episode based on Robin Hood and actually quite enjoying it. And I thought that, what's his name, Ben Miller, I always get him mixed up with Rob Brydon. Ben Miller played a pretty good sheriff in Nottingham, nowhere near as good as Alan Rickman, but you know, little is. And I didn't mind it. It was okay, but in the end it was only a self-contained episode of the TV show, so again, doesn't hold a candle to Prince of Thieves. And I also have some fond memories of watching the BBC TV series, the BBC version of Robin Hood back in the day. I think it used to be on before Doctor Who, before the David Tennant Doctor Who episodes were airing in like the early or mid-2000s anyway. And I remember enjoying that show. It had Richard Armitage, and I think Richard Armitage, who went on to play Thorin in the Hobbit movies, I think Richard Armitage played the Sheriff of Nottingham, if I remember correctly, and that TV show I had fun with. I remember thinking it was a really great romp, and it had some exciting elements. I love the main theme for that show. You know, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, 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 ba-da-dum. Not as good as Michael Caine's score for Prince of Thieves, but still, not a bad musical score, particularly for a television show, particularly for a BBC television show. But I've never felt the need to rewatch that adaptation of Robin Hood. Even so, I had a lot of fun with it. I think it was more aimed at a younger audience, which is probably why I had so much fun with it. And I remember it also went downhill after a while. If I remember correctly, I think they killed off Marion, but they tried to continue the story. And that doesn't really work. Anyway, yeah, I remember enjoying that when I was a kid, but yeah, I've never felt the need to rewatch it. And that is pretty much all the adaptations of Robin Hood which I've seen. They even talked about the Doctor Who episode, which centered around Robin Hood, which I enjoyed. Didn't really like the Pick-a-Powder era, but I enjoyed that one episode. And there were some Robin Hood films which I like or either really like. You know, I'm a big fan of the Adventure Robin Hood from 1938. But Prince of Thieves is the best version of Robin Hood. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, is the best Robin Hood film. It just, because it has all those elements which I spoke about before, and the thing is, all the other Robin Hood films don't. Like I've already spoken about this. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, has that heart, you know, it has that joy, it has that adventure, that thrill, that excitement, that heartbreak, the real emotion, the pure joy, the flamboyance, and that visual wit. And, you know, other Robin Hood films have had those elements, but they haven't had all those elements that Prince of Thieves has. You know, the Adventure Robin Hood has a lot of those similar elements. It has a lot of that visual wit. I always remember that one really exciting stunt in that film towards the end. I'm not going to try and explain it off the top of my head right now, but I can see the image from it on the top of my head. But yeah, I always remember there were some really exciting parts in the Adventure Robin Hood, but it didn't have quite that heartbreak and that emotion that Prince of Thieves has. You know, whenever you get a scene between Marion and Robin Hood in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I felt there was so much emotion there, and much of that might be because of the musical score. You know, Michael Kamen did variations on the famous song by Bryan Adams, Everything I Do It For You. He had variations on that song and the main tune from that song in the score for this film in a scene in scenes between Robin Hood and Marion. So that might be why I felt more emotion there. But still, I didn't feel quite that much emotion between Robin Hood and Marion in that film. And, you know, Disney's Robin Hood didn't quite have that excitement that I wanted it to. Robin Hood Men in Tights, it didn't feel, you know, yeah, it just wasn't great. And then you get onto the Ridley Scott version of Robin Hood, and that didn't have the excitement or thrill that you wanted it to. It wasn't as fun as it should be. It felt it was taking itself too seriously. You know, a Robin Hood film, at least for me, should be fun and exciting and be a bit tongue-in-cheek, whilst that version of Robin Hood, and I know it has its fans and I liked parts of it, but that version of Robin Hood felt too serious. It felt like they were trying to really do a dark, gritty take on Robin Hood, and it didn't really work for me. Same with the Robin Hood from 2010, the one with Taron Egerton, just lacked most of what I mentioned before, although I love Taron Egerton in that film. Well, I love Taron Egerton in everything he's in. You know, he's just wonderful, and I can't wait to see what he does next. You know, and you get the point I'm making. The films I just mentioned, and even the television series, the BBC Robin Hood television series, they've had those elements of thrill, excitement, joy, heartbreak, real emotion, all that jazz, but they haven't had all of it. You know what I mean? They've had some of those elements, bits and pieces, but they haven't had all of it. Whilst Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves has all of it. And it worked so well, and I know it has problems. I know that it's, you know, geographically it's inaccurate at a point. I get that, and I know it's not a perfect film if you look at it from an objective standpoint. Like, if I stood back and looked at this film, you know, away from the way I'm looking at it right now, I could stand there and go, okay, that doesn't really work. I understand why people wouldn't like that. Sure, I get that the film has a lot of problems, but I feel similar about this film as I do about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. For me, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is a perfect film, and it's my favourite film of all time today, still, as of today. You know, it's still my favourite film of all time as of today. And the thing is, I know Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade has its issues. I know it has its problems, and I can clearly see why people would not love that film. And I can see why it wouldn't be for everybody. But I love it. Even though I know it's got its problems, I love it to pieces though. And I feel the same way about the original Star Wars trilogy. Listen, the original Star Wars trilogy has a lot of problems. Some of the dialogue is a bit clunky. Some of the acting isn't the best. Some of the effects, I mean, they were phenomenal for their time, but they're slightly outdated now, and, you know, it feels a bit... you can clearly tell that the trilogy wasn't planned as a trilogy, and there's all of that with the original Star Wars trilogy, and it has problems, but I don't care. I just don't care. I feel the same way about Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia. That's one of my all-time favourite films, which I really need to make a video on in the future, by the way, because I love that film to pieces. But that's one of my all-time favourite films. And I know it's 3 hours, and it does drag a bit in some parts, and it is a bit overly melodramatic and a bit sentimental and whatnot. And I understand why somebody would watch Magnolia and really not like it, particularly with its end. Yet I love it to pieces. I just love that film. The same with Jurassic Park, and the same with Catch Me If You Can, and the same with Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. These are some of my favourite films of all time, and I can understand why somebody would watch them and really take a disliking to them and have all these problems with them. I can understand that, and I can understand why someone would watch Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and have a lot of problems with it. And, I can understand why it might even be somebody's least favourite interpretation of Robin Hood. Although, if it was, I would urge you to watch the Taron Egerton version and, get back to me if you think the Taron Egerton version of Robin Hood is better than Prince of Thieves. But still, I can understand why someone wouldn't really like Prince of Thieves. But I just love it, though. And I don't care about his problems. I just don't, because I was so caught up in it. I never took my eyes away from the screen. It's been stuck in my mind for the past week in a way that most films don't. Even films that I love, and even some films that I really enjoyed watching recently. Like, not too long ago, a couple of nights ago, I watched Thelma and Louise for the first time. Great film, but it hasn't really been stuck in my head the same way that Prince of Thieves has. And the musical score, I haven't really spoken about it yet, but I mean, I've spoken about it quite a bit actually, but I haven't spoken about it in detail. It's so perfect. It's just perfect. And Michael Caine did such a superb job with that main theme and the way he incorporated the Bryan Adams song, as I already mentioned, the way he incorporated the Bryan Adams song, Everything I Do It For You, into the moments between Marion and Robin Hood in the film. It's just, that musical score is so on point. And yes, I can see why one might argue that it elevates the film to be better than it actually is. I can see that argument, but I don't think that's always the case. I hear some people say with musical scores that they make the film better than they actually deserve to be. Like, if you take the musical score out of certain movies, like say with the Indiana Jones franchise, or say with the Star Wars franchise, if you take the music out of those films, they don't have the same excitement and thrill, and they're not as good as the films as if you put the musical scores in, if you get what I mean. Like, the musical scores make those films better. And I understand that argument. I get that argument. But I disagree with it. If you take a musical score out of a film, that's like taking, I don't know, an actor out of a film. That's like taking the director away from a film. That's like taking the cinematographer away from a film. That's like taking the props or the costume designers away from a film. You understand the point I'm making? It's an integral part of a film. That's one of the reasons I love musical scores so much. They're integral to films. And the fact that, yes, you might be able to take the Michael Caine score away from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and it wouldn't be as good, doesn't matter, because it is there, though. It's the whole thing is, what if the apple didn't fall on Newton? Well, it did. It did fall on Newton, and then the musical score for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is there when you watch the film, and it's still and it makes the film so good though. I think the music score for any film is integral to what makes the film good or bad, or it can elevate a film to be much better than it actually is. But you get the point of making it, I'm not even sure if I'm making sense anymore. I'm getting all worked up over the musical score thing, because I heard someone mention this recently, but the whole point I'm making is the musical score is so important to a film, and taking it away from a film would change it, yes. But don't do that then. Just because the musical score, it can make a film, and that's what it really did for me with this film. I'm not gonna lie and sit here and say that without the musical score, I would like the film as much as I do. But the musical score is there, and every time it was used in the film, and every time it came through, I just lit up. I smiled, and God, I couldn't believe how great the musical score was, and it reminded me of the best John Williams musical scores, particularly John Williams' Indiana Jones score. And whenever a film score does that, you know it's working. At least you know it's working for me. So yeah, the film might not be the same without the Michael Caine musical score, but the Michael Caine musical score is there, so it doesn't matter. And I just loved the score. I loved how it perfectly encapsulated all the stuff in the film and the feeling of so many scenes. And, you know, I loved watching this film so much. I loved the performances and the settings, and I loved how they shot on real locations for what it looked like, and I loved the feel of the film, and I loved how exciting it was. And you know, I said earlier on this podcast that the events of Robin Hood, Dawn of Elflin from 1938, is a perfect family adventure film. I do think it is, but I think this is, I don't know this is gonna, I don't know this won't make sense, but I think this is a perfect family adventure film, if you get what I mean. I think it's more perfect than The Adventure of Robin Hood from 1938. I think this is a more perfect family adventure film than that. And maybe I just loved it because it's a swashbuckling adventure film that reminded me of what films can make you feel. Maybe that's why I loved it. But the fact is I did. I loved it so much, and I can't wait to rewatch it. I haven't had the chance to rewatch it properly since watching it for the first time, because I like to rewatch. I like to watch a new film every day at the moment. I'm trying to watch a new film as much as I can right now. So I haven't had the chance to rewatch this film yet. Yet the moment I do, I know I'm just gonna be in for such a treat, because I loved how heroic this film felt. I loved how you went on this journey with these characters, and I love how it was directed. I love how it was staged and how it was shot. And Alan Rickman as the sheriff in Nottingham, and Kevin Costner as Robin Hood, Morgan Freeman, Christian Slater, the one who played mine. I'm not going to try and pronounce her name again. But all these performances, Little John in this film, loved him as well. And God, I just love this film. And it also felt like an experience, which, in my opinion, the best films do. It felt like an experience, and it was wonderfully engaging, and I couldn't believe how much I loved it. And I can see why some people wouldn't, but I just loved it to pieces. Even though I know it has its problems, I don't care. Loved it so much. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I'm going to say that it's a, you know what, I'm feeling generous today. I'm going to say it's a 10 out of 10. I know it has its problems. I understand that. But I don't care. I don't care. Plus, no film's perfect anyway. You know, no film is perfect. There's this misconception with some people that films have to be perfect, and if they're not, then, oh, we can't give it a 5-star or 10 out of 10 or whatever. But no film's perfect. But it might be perfect in your eyes. That's how I felt with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I don't know where it would sit, by the way, in my top 10. If I'm being honest, I don't know if it would actually be in my top 10 yet. I'd have to think about it more. But you know what? It would definitely be up there. It'd have to be in my top 10. It just have to be now. This is, one of my favourite films. For definite now. And it's the best Robin Hood film. It just is. I know there's some people who might disagree with me and might say the original The Adventure of Robin Hood from 1938, and I know I can understand that argument, but you know, I think this one is better. But that's just me. I love this film to pieces, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's streaming on Netflix as of now. It's still streaming on Netflix, and I'm hoping it will still be streaming on Netflix by the time I put this podcast out. So if you see it on Netflix, check it out if you haven't seen it already. Even if you have seen it, check it out again. And remind yourself why I love this film. And if you didn't, well, you're just wrong. You know, if you didn't, that's fair enough too, but still. I mean, I loved it, and I wanted to talk about it on this channel. And it's my channel, so, you know, I can kind of do whatever I want. Anyway, I've just realised I've been rambling for 40 minutes, so I'm going to round this up because you guys tell my voice that I'm getting ready to cough again. You know, I'm not feeling well, I'm feeling very dizzy right now, but you understand the point I'm making. I love this film because of his performances, because of how exciting and thrilling and adventurous it felt, because it felt like an experience, because of how heroic it all was. And I love the characters, I love the cast, I love the feeling of the film, I love the settings, I love, pardon me, I love this film. I love the emotion of the heartbreak, and I loved its flamboyance and this visual wit in the film, and I just loved it. I love Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and I can't believe I waited so long to watch this film. I've even got the DVD in my house, and I waited so long to watch it though. Yeah, love this film so much, and I can't recommend it enough. It is the best Robin Hood film in my opinion, and it's now one of my favourite films too. It's now one of my favourite films of all time as well. Yeah, if you haven't got it already, I love this film. Absolutely adore it. And so, all in all, as I've already said, I'm going to say that Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I'm going to say that it's a 10 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. You can see I'm quite tired right now because I'm recording for over 40 minutes and I'm getting very dizzy and I feel like I'm going to absolutely collapse once I finish recording this podcast. So thank you as always for watching or listening, whatever you did. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like, subscribe on this podcast. And if you have seen Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below, whether you love it or hate it, or maybe in the middle with it. Whatever your thoughts are on Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, let me know in the comment section below. And if you haven't yet, please click down below and like, subscribe on this podcast, and look forward to many more podcasts coming very soon on this channel. As already mentioned, thank you as always for watching or listening, and I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye!